Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over some severe weather in the Northeast. We already have a slight risk up for some parts of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. And then we have a marginal risk which spreads across much of the rest of the Northeast. We're also going to be going over the chillier temperatures which are going to come behind the system. So we're going to have temps drop into the 30s and low 40s with even a little bit of high elevation snowfall in areas of upstate New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire. So a lot to cover in today's video. I'm thinking that tomorrow's video will probably have another longer range discussion about the pattern, but I think it'll be more tied to the La Nina. So I'm still debating on what tomorrow's video will be about, but it's probably going to be more of a pattern or long range type of video. So before we get into it, if you have any video suggestions, if you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. If you have any special requests, send them over to the email address right here. It's also in the bottom of the description. Or also if you have any weather photos that you want to send in. So anything of the leaves changing, maybe you got a little bit of snowfall, especially as we get into the winter. Anything interesting that you see, send them over to that email address and I'll feature you in the video. So let's get right into it, and let's start off with your current National Weather Service page. You can see that we have a few wind advisories scattered throughout parts of South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana, California, Nevada, and Oregon. We also have a few red flag warnings in Southern California with some freeze warnings in parts of Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and even a little bit of Minnesota and South Dakota. And then in kind of that purple color, that's where we have some frost advisories. That's up for parts of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, and Minnesota as well. So that's mainly for what's happening this morning. So I'm assuming that they're probably going to take some of these down over the next couple of hours. But even though we're not seeing any real cold temperatures as we get into tomorrow, I think probably by Sunday it will start to get much colder once again into the eastern United States, and that was the topic mainly of yesterday's video. So let's get into the severe weather side of things, starting off with the Storm Prediction Center page. You can see they have a slight risk of severe weather up for much of upstate New York into western Vermont, western Massachusetts, western Connecticut, much of New Jersey, much of eastern Pennsylvania, and then maybe even a little bit of northern Delaware and northeasternmost Maryland, where we have that slight risk currently in place. We have a marginal risk which is outside of there into much of New England and then down through the mid-Atlantic, and then we have a general thunderstorm risk which goes all the way down the east coast and as far north as the Canadian border. So looking at a couple of the individual risks, you can see that we have a low risk of tornadoes, but we still do have a chance. It's a 2% risk of tornadoes within a 25-mile radius of anywhere within this green zone. I've covered this a couple times before, but for any new viewers, this does not mean that there's a 2% risk over the entire area. This just means that there's a 2% risk within a 25-mile radius of any one given point. So if you live right here, there's a 2% chance that you would get some tornadic activity. If you live right here, there's a 2% chance that you would get some tornadic activity. So it's within a 25-mile radius of your location, and there's a 2% chance of that occurring within that area. So when you add up the risk, I would say there's a 50 or 60 or 70% chance that we see at least one tornado somewhere within this zone, although we don't know exactly where that's going to be. So it's a low risk as of right now, but it does not mean that it's at zero. So you at least want to be paying attention to it. I think the bigger risks are going to be with things like wind, where you see that we have a 15% chance of wind damage within a 25-mile radius of any given point in this yellow shaded area. So the same rules apply for the tornado map and the wind map as well. So you would have to take a 25-mile radius of any one given point, and within that area there's a 15% chance of somewhere seeing wind damage. So it can be confusing again, but once you get used to it, it's not really that confusing. So it was confusing for me, especially the first couple of times that I was looking at this trying to figure out what exactly that 15% risk meant. But it does get a little bit easier once you get more into the swing of things, especially in the springtime when you're dealing with severe weather day in and day out. You'll start to definitely get used to how those maps work. Now, let's start taking a look at the radar and timing this out for you. And then we're going to take a look at, after we talk about the severe weather, we're going to talk about the colder temperatures and the snow potentially in the Northeast. So it's going to be just very minor snowfall, but it will be interesting nonetheless, because we will be dealing with probably the first snow for some of these areas of the season. So we're looking at some heavy rainfall, especially along this arc right here from about Montreal down to Syracuse and then all the way into central Pennsylvania, where we have some of those thunderstorms really starting to fire up. Behind these storms, you're going to have some lighter and moderate rainfall. So even though you get done with maybe the first batch of strong storms, you will still be dealing with a little bit of rain, nothing severe, behind the system. So it's going to be a bit of a peculiar type of storm, because normally in these stronger severe storm events, you have one line of storms that goes by, maybe you have another line of storms, but there's at least a break in between. And in this case, we're not going to get that break. So it's going to be difficult to kind of figure out when the thunderstorm has actually stopped, because it's going to continue to rain. Just the intensity of the rain is not going to be nearly as heavy as when it was when you were in the middle of that severe storm. So it's going to be an interesting one, especially if you have any football games. I know there's a high school football game in my town today, and they're doing a big celebration. So hopefully nothing gets ruined with all the rain that's going to be coming through. So that might cause some issues if you have any plans, especially if they're outdoors with the rain that's going to be going through. It looks like you'll probably be within rain from when it starts to when it ends. Probably it'll be a 3 or 4 hour duration. So it's not going to be super long lived, but it will eat up a good chunk of time. Now, if we move this on to around 3 p.m. Today, you can see that we have in eastern Pennsylvania, central New York, and even up into parts of Canada, some of those severe thunderstorms still starting to line up, and they're actually a little bit stronger than before. So it will be a little bit more of a broken up line as you get further to the south. You'll have more of the steady rain as you get further to the north. One of the reasons is because it'll be a little bit colder further to the north, so you're not going to have the same ability to have convection as you would if you were further to the south. So areas like Maryland and Pennsylvania might be dealing with some stronger storms, but with less rainfall in between, whereas an area further north might be dealing with some less severe storms, but with a longer duration of moderate or steady rainfall. Now, if we move this on to around 6 p.m. Today, there's going to be, again, that line of storms, that initial line, and then right behind it, you'll have additional rainfall right there. It's not going to be a hugely severe line of storms. It will be fairly potent. You want to watch out for potentially any strong winds. I think that'll be the main threat with this, but if we're looking at anything like a tornado outbreak, that's definitely not expected as of right now. You have that one line of storms, which goes from the Canadian border all the way down to the mid-Atlantic, and that, again, that's just going to continue to sweep on further to the east. So, again, this is by 6 p.m. Eastern Time today, here to be by 9 p.m., and this is when it starts to turn much less tornadic and convective, and this is because it's moving over the Atlantic at this point. So some of the storms now are moving into the maritime waters, and what that means is that you're going to have some less favorable conditions for severe weather. If you live along the coast, one of the reasons that you usually will not see severe weather, or most storms will die out before they actually head to you, is because you have a little bit of a zone of maritime conditions where you have more averaged out temperatures. So, for example, in the summertime, you actually want to be at the beach. You want to have some of those nice and cooler temperatures where you're only in the 70s, maybe the 80s. It's not as warm as it is inland, but in the wintertime, if you like cold and snow, you want to be further inland because you're going to have colder temperatures. And along the coast, because of the water effects, because you're having some of that air come off the water, you're going to have much warmer temperatures than the surrounding locations. So it is a bit of a flip-flop between the two seasons, and that's being shown especially with severe weather, where it is a little bit cooler along the ocean and along the beach areas. And because of that, you're not going to have the same level of severe storms as you will if you're a little bit further inland. So you see those storms continuing to fire up into New England. By this point, it's mainly just rain. We're not dealing with anything really all that convective. It starts to move further to the east. So now parts of Maine are getting in on some of the heavy rainfall at times. We still could see some severe weather with these storms. This is by 6 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday morning. And then by, I think, probably by noon on Sunday, everything should be out of here except for extreme eastern Maine, where areas like Eastport, Caribou, as you get into that part of the state, you probably will still be dealing with some lingering rain, but the rest of the Northeast looks to be fairly good in terms of any rainfall. If you look at the total amount of rain that we have received or that we're expecting to receive, we're looking at above an inch in that yellow color. So for this entire area right here, we're looking at over an inch of expected rainfall, and even we're looking at 2+ inches in this kind of red color, which you see especially for northern New England and also along the Great Lakes. So right along Lake Ontario there is where we're dealing with some of the heavier amounts of rainfall, and that's actually going to be because of lake effect. We're having lake effect rain, not snow this time, but lake effect enhanced rainfall over some of these areas. So that's why you see right along the lakes we have some heavier rainfall of 4 or 5 inches, and then when you get inland into the Adirondacks, you're dealing with less rainfall because some of the elevation is breaking up those streams of heavier moisture. So that's an interesting effect that we're going to be seeing occur later today. If we look at the high temperatures, these are going to definitely be warm enough for severe weather. We're above 70 degrees over this entire area, so it is going to be warm today over many of these areas, but look right behind the front. We're looking at 50s, maybe even 40s up into parts of the northern plains as you get further to the northwest. So it will start to definitely cool down behind the front. We're looking at about a 20-degree temperature difference between eastern Pennsylvania and western Pennsylvania. So that's definitely going to be something that could spark up a little bit of more energy. When you have a big temperature difference, it does start to increase the instability, which is definitely something that you need for severe weather. If you look at the dew points, these are also going to be high enough. We're at about 60 to 65 over most of these spots. And if we look at the amount of CAPE, which is convective available potential energy, you can see that's going to be about 500 to 1,000 right ahead of the front. So we're looking at maybe a 100 mile, a few dozen miles ahead of the front. You're going to be dealing with that extent of energy. So by this point, the front and the severe storms are right along here. So you're dealing with areas that are right ahead of it, dealing with heightened CAPE. So even though you live, if you live in, let's say, an area of New England, and you see that your area has 0 CAPE, and you're wondering, how am I going to actually end up with some severe weather? This line of high energy is actually going to continue to pounce on further to the east. So right now, the heaviest, the largest area of CAPE is within the spot of Vermont, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland. But eventually, it would move into an area like New England, and that's how you guys would end up with the severe weather. So it's a little bit misleading when it's just this one still frame. But if you were to look through the model, that area of energy is going to continue to move on to the east, and then if we look at the SCP, the supercell composite parameter, usually when this is above about 2 or 2.5, that's when you want to worry about this, or at least look at it, because this is indicating when supercells are possible to develop. So if you don't know, a supercell is basically the type of storm that we have. So a supercell is usually one of the stronger types of storms. It's the type of storm that breaks off from the rest of the line of storms. So you see this usually in the plains when you have a big tornado. Normally it's going to be from a supercell type thunderstorm, and these can be usually the most dangerous or the most worrying. So when you have a higher amount of SCP, that's indicating that the parameters and the ingredients needed for supercells to develop are there. We're not dealing with a huge amount of SCP, so these aren't off the chart type of numbers, but it is at least indicating that the chance is there for a little bit of supercell development. And then moving on to the temperature side of things behind the system for this would be Monday morning. So just one day or about 24 hours after the system has moved through, you're looking at temperatures in the morning that are going to get down into the low 40s over much of the Northeast, except for if you live again right along the coast. We're looking at, if you live along the coast, probably I would say 45 to 50 degrees, even maybe above 50 in a few of those spots. But especially once you get a few dozen miles inland, you're definitely going to be getting down into the low 40s, and especially into parts of northern New England and the interior Northeast. You guys could have a little bit of a belt of 30 to 40 degree temperatures. And if you get back into the Ohio Valley, same thing applies. We're dealing with colder temperatures there. It will be a little bit warmer right along the Great Lakes. You can see that because of the westerly winds that we're going to have, you're going to have much warmer temperatures along Lake Michigan. And then once you get further inland and further to the east, it'll be much colder. So, for example, Detroit, you're probably going to be right around 40 degrees. But if you live right along that part of that stretch of land over western Michigan, you're probably going to be actually dealing with low temperatures in the low 60s if you live right along the lake. So that's going to be something that's interesting, a very localized type of effect, but it will be something that you want to pay attention to. So if you're on the east side of one of the Great Lakes, you will probably be a little bit warmer than those of you who are inland of the Great Lakes. So that's one of the effects that you want to at least keep in mind. And when it comes to the colder temperatures, we could also see a little bit of snow be generated out of this. So this is for Monday. Mainly, most of the snow would come Monday morning for parts of the high elevations in the Northeast. Not too much for Vermont or Maine, but in the southern Adirondacks, maybe you could get a couple inches of snow. Same for the White Mountains in central New Hampshire, where we could be dealing with a little bit of snowfall. But in terms of low elevation snowfall, nothing as of right now. And even this high elevation snowfall, unless you're at the very highest peaks, you're really going to only be dealing with a dusting to 2 inches of snow. So definitely nothing that I can really make a snowfall forecast on. I'm not going to dedicate a whole video to this one event, but it is something interesting, and that something that did catch my eye when I was looking through the models today. So that's at least something that if you want to go up hiking, especially for Monday afternoon or even Tuesday evening or Tuesday morning and the early half of Tuesday, you could maybe even see a little bit of snow up into those areas. So an interesting type of effect. It is going to be a interesting storm to look at, and definitely something that you want to at least pay attention to if you live in the Northeast. Just keep an eye on the radar. Again, I don't think this is going to be a huge event, but it will maybe be one of the first thunderstorm events that these areas have seen in a couple weeks. So it'll kind of refresh your mind on how severe weather works and all of that. So if you did enjoy this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss another one. And again, if you have any special requests, if you have any weather photos that you want to be featured, send it over to the email address in the description down below. And if you have any comments or questions, leave a comment down below and I'll be responding within a few hours of you posting that. So I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Goodbye.